The quicker that you can compound that. Awesome, guys. So welcome to the Ryan Magic Show. Today I'm here with John Sonmez. It's really nice to have you here, bro. And it was so crazy. Like usually I've followed the guests that I have on for a little bit longer, but I just engaged in a little bit of your content off, as I was mentioning to you before we jumped on today, from seeing a photo with you and Elliot Hulse. And I instantly felt such a sense of groundedness and maturity in the way that you communicate. And I know you target mainly men as well, but today, I know most of the advice will be applicable to men and women, but we will do some male specific content as well. But first and foremost, man, after researching a little bit more about you and witnessing what a phenomenal transformation you've had in your life, we got kicking into your story before, and I was like, let's get this going live on the show. So I'd
Yeah,
love for you to tell me about your transformation to getting to the point of who you are today, the character that you have today, and the external exterior reality you've created for yourself throughout your lifetime. Man, give us a little bit of a glimpse into your story.
sure. Yeah. So, kind of what I was saying before we got on the podcast was that, it's not like the transformation just happened like in one period of time, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really this, you have these breakthroughs, right, as you develop and you have these periods of time where you're underground. I think, you know, it's Elliot Hulse was a really good example of this, right? I've been following Elliot Hulse for a long time too, and I saw many of his changes, right? What he called a catharsis, which I think is very relevant, right? It's where you're underground for a long period of time, and it feels like nothing's happening, but then all of a sudden, like maybe Tony Robbins would call it a breakthrough. You have a breakthrough moment,
Mm-hmm.
and that happened to me multiple times in life. I think the first one was probably when I was in high school, right? Growing up as a kid, I was really shy, extremely introverted. I was this kind of dorky kid that got picked on a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember waking up one morning. I think it was like my sophomore year of high school, and I just had this thought in my head. This thought that was, why not me, right? And that was like just this powerful thought because
How old were you when you had this thought?
I would say it must have been about 16 or so, right?
That's a pretty big thought to just have jump into your
Right.
mind. That's like, if you believe, do you believe, are you a believer in God or spirituality?
More of the spirituality aspect. I grew up
Yeah.
Christian, but I feel like just, at some point in your life, the universe taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, it's time to wake up." And there's sometimes no rhyme or reason for it. I think that it's just certain people at certain times. And that was kind of the one of those moments for me, is I just had that thought, that came into my head. And that thought was an extremely powerful thought because I thought about my life, and at that time, being in high school, there was the jocks and all the popular kids, and that's where it pertained to. I was like, well, why not me? Like, what is different about me? And I realized there's nothing. It's just the choices that I make, right? So I could be whatever I
Mm.
wanted to be. And that's when I first had this glimpse of this kind of powerful idea of, some people would call it fake it till you make it. I call it acting as if, right? So
Mhm.
like acting as if you're already what you want to be. So I
Mm.
kind of had this viewpoint, this vision. I started envisioning the myself, who I wanted to become, not someone else, but a different version of myself, like the best version of
Mm.
myself. And I started pretending like I was already that person. I started acting like that person, started walking, talking, dressing, whatever I could. And, at that time when I was 16, my vision of myself was not a very mature vision of myself. And a lot of my motivations for doing what I did was for validation, external validation. And
Mhm.
so I made a lot of external changes. I started going to the gym, I started lifting weights, I got in pretty good shape. I started dressing better and being more confident and being more outgoing and talking to people. But all of these things that I was doing, it was all based on what I call lesser motives in life, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that in order to have higher motives, you have to start with lesser motives. No one can just be altruistic. You can't do that. The people that say,
Mm.
"Oh, I want to save the world," they're lying to themselves because
Mm.
your first motives are, I want to prove people wrong. I'm angry. I want to get validation from men, from women. right? Those are the motives that initially motivate us to do things in life. And then as we start to fulfill those needs and start to, grow, then we start to unlock better motivations in life. And so I was operating out of those motivations. And so those motivations will only take you so far. So most of my changes at that point were external. They weren't internal, because I
Mm.
figured out I could become what I wanted to become by being a chameleon and mimicking the people that I wanted to be like, instead of actually changing internally. And so I had some success in that. I changed externally. I got in good shape. I became more popular in school, started doing sports, and it was positive effects on me, but my motivations were bad. So, that transformation didn't last very long,
When you say
right? So,
bad, you mean more individual based as opposed to service based or conscious.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it wasn't about, it was still like my focus was on about what I could get, not
Mm.
what I could become. Right.
Mm.
And so what ended up happening was, of course, when you change those external things without changing the internal, it doesn't last. It fades, because it requires your concentration, your willpower to keep that reality into focus when it's
Yeah.
not the true reality. And so it faded. So, the pictures that you've probably seen on my website, that's what happened afterwards. I got fat.
Oh wow,
I
that
had
was
to,
after the initial transformation when you're
yeah,
16.
yeah.
So were you
So
more you put on more weight? Like you weren't that much overweight when you were 16. You actually started to put it on more in your early 20s kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, I kind of let myself go.
Mm.
And I, because that, the thing about like seeking those external validations is you can never get enough of it.
Mm.
And so no matter how in shape I was, no matter how much success I had, I always felt like I needed more. And eventually you hit the breaking point where you just can't hold it up anymore. And that's what happened to me. So I just let everything go. I just started playing video games. I got lazy, and I let my true colors, because internally I hadn't changed. Externally I had changed. So internally I was
Mm.
still lazy. I was still fat. I was still these things. And so the external eventually reflected the internal again.
Yeah.
And I hit this point in life where I went through a period of just not having very much motivation, just reverting back to my old ways. And then, but I still had that thought in my head. I still knew that change was possible. That why not me? That in the breaking point for me came at this point where I went to the store and I had to buy size 46 pants because the size 44 didn't fit me anymore. And then I
Mm.
realized, hey, I'm fat. That was, I had to face that reality.
Mm.
And I had gone through some things. I had torn my pec. I had a complete pec tear, and that I lost my identity because my identity was being the biggest guy in the gym. And so that kind of led to this path of getting overweight and all
Mm.
that. But when that happened, that's when I started to realize, that's when I started to make bigger changes. And I started to realize that the path that I was going on in life, that it was going to lead me down, it wasn't going to lead me down the path of what I wanted, right? Because I have this thing that I talk about a lot, that everybody thinks that someday they're going to be a rock star. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is that, we kind of put in our head, and I had this in my head, this idea that, well, someday I'm going to be rich and famous and have all this other life. But and I think that a lot of us stay in that mediocrity because we believe that someday, it's almost like we're treating life as a dress rehearsal, and our
Mm.
real life will begin at some point, right? It's,
Yeah.
Seneca talked about this, and where he said, on the shortness of life, right? It's like so many people are waiting to live.
Mm.
They're not actually living. And that
Yeah.
was me. And I realized that, and I had this kind of shocking moment, this sobering moment, where I realized, like, if I wanted the things that I actually wanted in life, I would have to I would have to make changes, drastic changes.
Mm.
And it wasn't just going to happen, not magically. I would have to actually take action
How
and
old
take
were you at
massive
this
action.
point, John?
At this point, I would say I must have been late 20s, like maybe 28 or 29 at this point.
Mm. Beautiful.
And
Yes.
so, and yeah, and so that pushed me down the direction of 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 going and getting in shape again, of stop being lazy, started working hard, and personal development. Around the same
Mm.
time, I started building a brand because I started a blog. I was a software developer,
Mhm.
and I started this blog for software developers and started to get popular. So I started learning about marketing and internet marketing. And what I found was amazing was that all the guys that were teaching sales and marketing, they had these amazing book lists that I had never heard of in my normal life.
Yeah.
Books like, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Mm.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Psycho Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, you know, all of these kind of books, Awaken the Giant with Tony Robbins. And so I wanted to learn more about marketing and sales. And so I started reading these book lists, and I was like, wow, this just opened up my eyes. It started taking me, because I was this really hardcore engineer, analytical person. And the first time I read Think and Grow Rich, I threw it right in the trash can because I was like, this is crazy. This is ridiculous. Like,
You got to
this is
sex
not something.
transmutation and you're like, no way, man. No way.
Actually, I didn't even make it that far. I made it to the point where he was talking about his son with the hearing, and like curing his
Mm.
hearing. And I was like, there's no way. But I kept on talking to these successful people, and they kept on saying this was the best book that they ever read. It changed their life. So I took it up again. And pretty soon I was, well, one thing that happened again, another like small breakthrough in transformation was, I realized that ignorance by definition is ignorant of its own ignorance, right? So what I mean by that is, by definition, when you're ignorant, you can't know it. It's like in Princess Bride, the iocane poison, right? You can't smell it or taste it or sense it in any way. So when you're ignorant, there's no way for you to know you're ignorant. It's impossible for you to detect. In fact, when you're ignorant, wisdom sounds like foolishness to you,
Mm.
right? Because
That's such a
that's
big point.
and so I started to realize, I was like, look, if all these successful people, if they are in this woo-woo stuff, you know what I mean? Then probably I'm the one who's ignorant, right? I couldn't detect this, but you can kind of look at, Tony Robbins says success leaves clues, right? And so,
Mm.
that was a clue for me. And I said, all right,
So
I'm
wait,
just
did
gonna.
you at this time
Mm,
stumble across like really think and feel into what ignorance meant at that time?
yeah,
And it
yeah,
was
yeah,
because you started to think about what ignorance meant that you went, well, there must be things that I don't know that I don't know.
exactly,
That's crazy.
exactly.
That's pretty cool. I really love what you said about wisdom looking like foolishness if you're ignorant to a topic. It's so true. And I've certainly had this experience across multiple, when you were talking about the seasons of breakdown to breakthrough, breakdown to
Hmm.
breakthrough, breakdown. Every next evolutionary breakthrough that I've had, my previous version would have looked at the same breakthrough and thought it was foolish. The new
Exactly.
concepts. So it's such a potent point.
But you have to build on these things, right? It's that's part of the process of growing.
Mm,
And just like an acorn grows into an oak tree, right? We don't blame the acorn at the stage when it's a sapling, and say it should be strong, and we see it as what it needs to progress through. And
yeah.
that's how we are. But yeah, so at that point I started to, that's where I started reading like Eckhart Tolle, and The Power of Now, and things like that, that I would have thought was just complete nonsense, right? And so I just started exploring all these things. I even looked at Dianetics. I was like, okay, is there something interesting there? And just started opening my mind. And it doesn't mean that I accepted, every single thing that anyone had to say, but I started to realize that, and this was another kind of breakthrough, is that it's better to have effective beliefs than true beliefs, right? So what I mean by
Yes.
that is that, some of the stuff that I subscribe to or quote believe, some of the woo woo stuff, maybe it's not scientific. Maybe it doesn't actually, maybe it's not even true.
Mm,
But you know what? If it's effective, it makes my life better. And so it's just like Dumbo's feather, right? The feather does not make Dumbo fly, but his belief that the feather makes him fly does make him fly. And so
mm,
the belief is the powerful thing. And
love that.
so that was a very big change and shift in me. And I remember a lot of people in my life thought I was crazy. They rejected that, but it didn't matter, because I was making more money, I was more successful, my relationships were more successful, I was more happy in life. I
Mm.
started letting go of expectations on people, and I that I went on this path of personal development. And pretty soon what ended up happening was I hit this kind of third transformation point, right? There
But
was
before we get into that, sorry to cut you off, John, but
yeah.
I think there's something really important in that
Mm.
that concept around having beliefs that serve you. Does it actually
Yeah.
make your life better, and choosing to adopt these beliefs and not needing to know or prove them? Because there's a lot, especially at the time that we're in right now with COVID and a lot of objectively unknown aspects to the world in our environment. There are a lot of cynical, skeptical people. What do you think is the
Yeah.
core behind people wanting to prove the accuracy of things? Like, why do people get so obsessed about whether something is true or not? What's your belief around what the core behind that is?
Yeah, it's because, it's scary that the nihilistic view that life is meaningless is scary.
Yeah.
And what we constantly try to do as human beings in order to make sense of things is to try to ascribe meaning to life. We
Mm,
want it to have some kind of inherent meaning because it's really scary to think that life has no inherent meaning.
mm,
And so I think that a lot of people are trying to find that. They're trying to find some reason for things and some meaning for things. And what most people don't realize is that you have to create meaning in life.
mm,
That that life itself is sort of a blank slate. It doesn't necessarily have to have meaning in itself. And when I say this, I still think that everything happens for a reason. I think that there is a great universal consciousness, and that every move that you make is not a mistake, because you can't make a mistake, because we're all, part of this one universal consciousness. I believe that, and I believe that all
yeah.
does happen and play out for a reason. But
And it
at the
serves you to
same
believe that, right?
exactly.
Mm,
But at the same time, I understand the nihilistic viewpoint that nothing, and again, they're the same viewpoint, right? I think as you zoom out far enough, you realize that the hand of God and utter chaos are one and the same, in the sense that from where we're at in the trees, not at the forest level, it's the same. It doesn't
mm,
matter, because we can't see the meaning, so there might as well not be meaning. And so the
mm,
only rational thing for us to do in this case is to create our own meaning out of life, right? I was just talking to
mm,
someone about, because I this year I ran ultra marathons, and I've been running marathons, and they asked me, well, why did you decide to train for a 100-mile race this year? And I said, well, why does it matter that a marathon's 26.2 miles? Why that distance? And why does the time matter? Why does it matter? Why is it a good time to get under 4 hours? Why do we, it's all arbitrary. The whole point of
yeah.
all of that is that we're making meaning out of it, right? Some
Mm,
arbitrary distance doesn't matter. Some time that you make some distance doesn't matter. What
yeah.
matters is that we've decided to create meaning out of it. And so for me to run, it wasn't about any particular thing. It's I decide to create this as a meaningful thing in my life, and to
Mm,
shoot towards having a faster and faster time, and to go through the training and the dedication of participating in this to create some meaning. And then all of our life is create all the stuff that we do. It's really, it doesn't have very much of a purpose, but we create that purpose. We choose to make meaning out of it. And so,
mm,
to answer your question, the reason why people are having to find the truth and is because they are trying to find an outside meaning in life. They want to
mm,
have some kind of cosmic meaning to things, when really they have to look internally and take the viewpoint. Like I said, it doesn't matter if God's hand is in everything or not. We're in the trees. We will never see it. So we
yeah.
have to create the meaning for ourselves in our life.
Yeah.
It's a scary thing to do.
I really love that that concept of people being nervous of the fact that life is meaningless, and therefore they're scared, and they try to cling to the certainty behind facts and figures, and what society's decided is a known truth. And I really love this quote by Gandhi that says, everything is meaningless, but you have to do it anyway because it's only you that can. And that to me
Yeah.
resonates because it hits both points of the the existential bummer of like, we're gonna die anyway, but you're here, so you
Right.
may as well just like play out your character however you see fit in this crazy play slash movie that is our life. Uh, yeah, it's that
Yeah.
resonates a lot with me. This conversation's resonating a lot with me.
Yeah, it's a very like Taoist truth, right? The
Mm,
Tao, sort of the way, right? The way is both is not the way and the way. It's this and not this, right? And that's really what they talk about as the way. And you can't really put it into words. They have all these different ways of trying to say this thing, which is that these two things can exist at once. It's like, the mind and the not mind. It's like all of these things. And the way that I envision it, the way I see this, because I think it's really hard to see this, is I see it as building a sandcastle on the beach. Okay, in low tide, the tide is coming, the high tide is going to come, and the sandcastle is going to be wiped away, just like everything that we do in life and all our existence, and all those things. But do we not build a sandcastle? Right, we still build a sandcastle. and and
Mm.
and and really, if you look at our lives, and maybe at the cosmic eternity of life, the tide comes, and it will wipe away the sandcastle, and then it will become low tide, and we'll build a new sandcastle, and we'll continue the cycle of building that sand. We don't look at it and say, well, there's no point in building the sandcastle because the tide is just going to come and wipe it away. Because
Some people do though, right? When they get
right,
stuck in that apathy of getting into spirituality and going, well, what's the
yeah,
point?
but everything in life is temporary. There's nothing that's permanent, right? It's
Except
and
for
I think when you
permanence.
exactly,
The
exactly.
rabbit hole continues.
But I think when you realize that's when you start to let go of things, and that's important,
Mm,
because non-attachment, not holding on to things, because everything is borrowed, right? One thing that I think is powerful, that sort of influenced my life, is this idea that I don't own anything. Everything is borrowed. I'm just a steward of everything in my life. And the atoms of my body will someday go back to the ground where they came from. They don't really
mm,
belong to me. And when nothing belongs to you, then you cannot suffer loss. And so many people are, especially now, they're feeling these losses. They're suffering great loss, and it's because they're holding on to things, because they
mm,
believe incorrectly that they own anything. We don't own anything.
mm. That's powerful. And so, with your viewpoint on this, what's your kind of credos to life now? You're like just John 10.0, just about to like, what does your future look like with your sandcastle? What are you wanting to build, knowing that you can build anything, knowing that you're an expression of the universe? What your sandcastle now?
Yeah, I used to have like really concrete goals. I don't have very many concrete goals anymore.
Mm,
The way that I set goals now in life, because I used to set goals on what I would get, right?
mm,
So I wanted to make money, like the end goal was money. I wanted to get hot girls, and the end goal was getting hot girls, right? It was
yeah.
getting a nice car, whatever these things, right? The end goal was. And what I realized at the end of all those pursuits is disappointment, because what you get never makes you happy. Never, it may make you happy for a period of time, but it doesn't make you fulfilled. And so now my goals in life are about what I can become. And so the way that I see things is that there's nothing that I really want, but there's a lot more that I want to become. And so I can't really tell you kind of where I see myself. Like right now, all the things I'm pursuing in life are the things that I feel like will grow me, that where my weaknesses are, where I can still find some personal development in. And so I don't really have like big ambitions to do, major things. I mean, I suppose the largest contribution that I want to make right now is awakening more men, right? I feel like there's a crisis of masculinity today. Men have forgotten what it's like to be men, right? I call it the pussification of men. And society greatly shuns masculinity.
Mm,
And so a lot of young men, especially, they have no idea what it is, and they can't get the things that they want out of life because they won't step up and be men. So a lot of what I'm focusing in my mission right now is sort of targeted towards helping men to be able to get what they want, to become men, and then to get what they need, right? Because most of the guys, that watch my YouTube channel, that join my membership, and are bulldogs, to be honest, when they come to me because they want to get laid. They want that's the thing that they want. That's their
mm,
motivation. And that's one of those lower motivations, right?
yeah.
But you you have to help someone learn how to do that so they can see kind of the pointlessness of that, so that they can go to a higher motivation, right?
Yeah.
Which is where, they come wanting to learn these things, the basics of being a man, to get what they want
Mm,
out of life. And then what I try to teach them is what they actually need, which is more of the
yeah.
spirituality aspect of it, the stoic mindset, how to become actually strong, and to build themselves as men. And
Mm,
so that's really what I'm focused on, is how many men can I, make stronger, how many men can I bring into this kind of, awakening. And I'm not going to change the world. I don't intend to change the world, but I intend to change like individual men's lives, and by doing that, that's how we change the world. So
yeah, that's beautiful, man. So I've got a question around this
mm,
season that you are in at the moment of your life. You mentioned that you don't set long-term goals as much now because you don't have as much attachment to things, and you're more about developing your character and feeling empowered, and you take on the stoic mindset. How long have you been in that phase for, and have you found any issues with your ability to be consistent in
mm,
specific areas? Because I definitely, on my journey through a similar phase, have found that actually leaning into consistency, because I can do anything and because I'm not attached to as many things, I found a little bit more inconsistency, well, I may as well do this, and why not just learn guitar?
yeah.
Why not just start training for a marathon? Have you found that? And if so, how have you been able to get the balance right between non-attachment, what does it matter anyway, and let's really channel efforts in a long-term pursuit that's going to yield a great return from a fulfillment perspective, a character building perspective, and an external perspective?
That's the perfect question, because I don't have the answer to that. That's
Yeah,
the
you're
answer
right
that
in the
I'm on the
wave.
path to discover.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I've been trying to figure that out. And, I'm kind of in this phase right now where I am underground, where I don't see the growth that because I think back when I had those external motivations, when it
Mm,
was like make money, and I remember working 12-hour days every day and focused on my goal, and in achieving those things. And I think, wow, I don't have that same level of focus now. I don't have that. I can't do that anymore.
mm,
And I start to think, well, is there something wrong with me? Is there, what do I need to do in order to get back to that stage? And I'm struggling with it. And I believe the answer is because I still haven't found that right path, the right, the process. And and it's just going to take time before I come back into that phase. And so what I've been kind of looking at, sort of what I've been seeing now, is this idea of how important simplification and focus is, right? And
mm,
maybe this is maybe the period of time of letting go of other things, right? So
mm,
I have a lot of irons in the fire, from running multiple businesses and coaching. And I was training for a 100-mile race. I had to let that go. I got sick. I was forced to let that go,
mm.
because I was doing ultra running, which was 15 hours of running per week, and I'm 240 pounds. It's quite a toll on me to
Yeah.
do that. But I grew a lot. I gained what I needed to out of that experience. So I had to let that go, and so I'm having to let go pieces now, so that I can simplify and focus. And I think that really what you're talking about, I think the way that that comes back into focus is through focus, is through simplification. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm looking at for the next year is, how can I cut more things out of my life? Because
Mm,
I realized that when I was younger, and when I was first kind of making the transformations and really, making leaps and bounds in growth, it was because I was so singularly focused. I didn't have all these things going on. And sometimes when you become successful, you end up, like you have all these opportunities, and you start taking these opportunities, and then you have all these things going on. And it's hard to let those things go, because you don't want to let go of things that you've built, you know, but
mm,
there's a period of time that you need to actually. Well, one interesting thing that kind of was, a random book that I read. I read Matthew McConaughey. He wrote a book called Green Lights,
yeah.
and it was really interesting, because there's this point in his life where he was this big movie star, Okay, and he
Yeah.
was making all this money, and he was doing all these rom-com films, right? And they're offering him a lot of money for it, and he's like, I don't want to do this as an
Mm.
actor, right? And he had, I think he had like four companies. He had like a production company, he had like all these things, and he let like three of them drop,
Wow.
and he turned down all these movie roles, like, and they kept on offering him more and more money, $13 million for this role, $20 million, because he didn't want to do that anymore, because he wanted to do something different. And
Mm.
he was patient, and everyone thought he was crazy, and he was burning all his leads and contacts in Hollywood. And then finally, I think, what was that movie, the with the
When he gets sick.
uh, yeah, yeah. In fact,
Yeah, I remember.
I believe that movie he did himself, like, or he it was like a low budget type of film that he was working with the director or producer, and they ended up doing that themselves. And uh and then now, he's done all these kind of dynamic roles where he's changed and grown as an actor. But in order to like become that new Matthew McConaughey that grew, he had to let go of all of this stuff. And it was a huge letting go. You know what I mean? Because
Absolutely.
it's an empire, right? It's to let go of an empire in order to pursue something. So I feel like I'm kind of in that little spot right there where I have to make this choice. But it's tough. It's a tough place to
Mate,
be. So
that's beautiful musings on this topic. I feel like you've got a beautiful hypothesis for this next journey of experimentation on
mm,
this Stoic philosophy. Because and Dallas Bias Club is the
that's it. Yeah,
movie as
that's
well.
it. Yeah,
That's a very I found it very inspirational, the actual storyline, because it was very service based, and I was like, wow, this guy's like full in service and he's fighting for what he believes in. So I can see the passion, and it's cool to hear the backstory behind it. But I find it really interesting because if you think about Marcus Aurelius, he was doing he had a very clear role
yeah,
as the leader, and he wasn't also a musician and also a sports person and also pursuing all these. He's like, my dharmic path, my purpose and mission is serving through this avenue, and that really
yeah,
is that, because I'm also feeling into this for my own journey. I'm in a similar place to the way that you described where you're at, where I haven't fully uh, landed on an external outcome from the basis of feeling stable in my internal map. It's not, I haven't landed. I feel like I've awakened a lot more. I feel a lot more grounded and centered and fulfilled, but that missing piece hasn't clicked in yet. And who knows whether it'll fully ever click in, but I definitely resonate with the idea of stripping things back and focusing. Um, and I feel like in the past, the reason why I didn't focus was because the reason I did focus is from a place of insecurity. And then
hmm
I
hmm
opened up to more things because I was
yeah,
able to work on that insecurity and feel more full. So it's like, I'm full. Let's celebrate. I can do all these different cool things now. And then things have gone wider, and now there's like the next evolution is going narrower as well. And I can relate to that.
yeah. It's kind of interesting because a lot of the guys that I coach, or that are in my community membership, they ask me, how can I make $1 million? And I think about it, and it's like they're looking for one way to do this, right?
Yeah.
And that was me at some point. And now I think, like, I can think of a million ways to make $1 million. Like, my problem is there's too many ways. You know what I mean? And it's just it kind of
Absolutely.
illustrates that, like. And so your problem initially is one of limiting beliefs, because you
Yeah.
don't know what's capable. Now there's, and it's like you're just like, how could I even do, like, your mind is so blocked, like your vision is so closed, and you can't see any of the doors that are
Yeah.
standing before you. And then you hit a point where there's too many doors, and you can't decide which door to go through, because there's so many doors. And
Yeah.
that's a problem as well. And it's just so interesting how we go through those
Yeah.
that phase. And then
Even what you said at the start of the convo, where you're like, I think most people in life are at a point where they just assume they're going to get rich and famous at some point. And I was thinking, that's what you think. I believe the same thing, and I really resonated with what you said. But I think a lot of people don't believe that they're ever going to, uh,
okay, yeah,
and a lot of people might stumble and go, is it possible? So a lot of people don't, they're ignorant of the fact that they could. They're just like, different people want to become
yeah,
success. Like, they're different to me. And that's why Matthew McConaughey is successful, because he's different. And then you had the realization, no, holy crap, why not me? Well, there is no reason why not. And then you went after it. But a lot of people then stumble into, hang on, it's got to be possible and I want to do it. And then people only once, from my opinion, once you've formed the belief that things are possible, then do you sit in this position of, okay, well, I know it's going to happen at some point. But then it becomes the question of like, well, when are you going to start living fully in what you know to be true now, and making that reality real for yourself? When are you going to like press go on the camera, like roll, like record on the camera of the
Exactly.
movie of your life and start living it more fully?
And
uh
and really to start to get to the point where, because if you're focused on the end goal, so many people put their life on pause, and they're like, when I get this promotion, when I make this money, when I get this girl, when I have this family, when I have this, then I'll start living my life. And I
mm,
just have to grind and get through this now until I get to that point. And it's like, there's this movie, I think a Jim Carrey movie called Click, and he fast forwards through his life, through the bad parts of life, and he realizes
is
he
that Adam
fast forwards.
Sandler?
Oh, maybe it's Adam
Yeah, yeah,
Sandler. Yeah,
it's
it's Adam
yeah, yeah.
Sandler. Yeah,
All right.
yeah, yeah. But it's called Click, right? And it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, it's what we do in life is we and what we have to realize is that, it is the journey. I mean, it's a cliche that people say it's not, it's life is a journey, but to really really realize that, and realize that it's not that you just have to do the grind, you have to love the grind. You have to realize that
Yeah.
this is actually life, and you are living it now. You're not putting it on pause and waiting until you get to that point, and then your life begins. Your life is now,
Mm,
because it's a shame if you hit some. And this is where, I think a lot of rock stars and famous people become suicidal, is because they work so hard to achieve something, and they're not living their life, and they finally get there and they don't have the joy that they expected, and so then they turn to drugs and anything that can make them feel that high, and then they still don't feel it, and then they end themselves. And but so many people are living life like that. That's, again, a really good book. Like, the beginning of it is Seneca's on the shortness of life, and I read that beginning of that book, because it's very short, probably over 100 times.
which book's
I
this?
had it on my calendar. It's called on the shortness of life.
Okay.
And uh and and you know and, and I had it on my daily routine to, like, read that book, every day for a while, because I want to keep on reminding myself how short life is, and how you must start living your life now. You
Mm,
cannot wait to live your life.
yeah. What do you do at the moment to remind yourself of um, yeah, of the fact that the journey is the most important thing?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just a moment of just kind of reflection of saying to myself that I'm choosing to do what I'm doing. No
Mm,
one's making me do it. I don't have to do it. I'm choosing to do it.
mm,
Sometimes it helps. I'm here in San Diego. There's a lot of homeless people, and sometimes I see them, and I'm like, see, these people are free. They can do whatever they want to do. They don't have to do anything.
mm,
It's like, but that's a choice. Like, you don't have to go to work. You don't have to do a job. You don't have to do anything. You can just, you can live. They're living, right?
mm,
Maybe you don't want to live like that. That's fine. But it's like a realization to realize that everything in life is a choice. Because I think the thing that stops us, that steals life from us, is when we feel like we have to do things, like they're or obligated, like we don't have a choice. But when we realize that everything that we're doing is a choice,
man.
then we realize, well, who's making that choice? Well, I'm making that choice. So if I'm making that choice, then this is me living my life. And so if you're going to make the choice, you might as well enjoy the choices that you're making. As it's sort of like the Stoic principle of the the dog being dragged by the cart, or if there's this dog chained to this cart, and the dog can either be dragged by the cart, or he can go along with the cart. And that's kind of how life is. So you kind of have to view it as, are you going to be dragged by the cart? Is that your viewpoint? Like, you're going the same direction, all the same things are happening. It's just a matter of a viewpoint. Are you going to be dragged, or are you going to be walking along the cart? Right? Because
Yeah.
some of the things in life that we think we have to do, it's not that we have to, it's just that they're the most logical choice that we choose. And so if we're going to make that logical choice and choose to do it, then we might as well buy full into it, right? Because a lot of guys that I coach, they're like, oh, I hate my job, I hate my boss. I'm like, okay, there's two choices that you have. You can either change your job, or you can love it. Like,
Yeah.
how could I love it? I'm like, well, you're choosing it, so love it. You might as well love it.
Yeah.
You might as well get the most out of this experience. Think of it as a trial. Think of it as a challenge, as a test, and enjoy every moment of this trial that you're going through. That's making you stronger, or
Yeah.
change your situation. Right? I think Eckhart Tolle said it in the Power of Now. He said there's three ways to deal with the situation. You can leave it, you can change it, or you can accept it. But the one thing you can't do is bitch about it, to whine and
I'm sure I
complain.
use that word as well.
I don't know exactly what he said, but it was something like that. And I was like, this is true. This is true. You every moment you have to choose. What are you gonna do? Are you just gonna accept it? Sometimes 90% of the time, acceptance is really the best answer. Just accept it, because most of the stuff
Yeah.
we can't change. All the stuff going on in the world. I get really upset about. I could get really upset about masks and all kinds of stuff, and erosion of liberties and stuff like that. But it doesn't, like, the illusion is that we're free. We're actually all slaves. We're all slaves. But once you realize that you're a slave, and you're okay with that, and you realize you have some amount of, like, you're a slave on a chain, and you have some amount of, like, flexibility with the chain that you have. Again, not that I'm saying that this is how things should be, but it's how they are, and we're not going to change the reality. But once you come
Yeah.
to realize that and start accepting that and embrace that, then you say, okay, well, this is how long my chain is. Well, what can I do with the length of the chain that I have? I feel like that's, a lot of people are going to listen to this and say, "Oh, that's unlibertarian," and
Yeah.
but it's reality.
Yeah.
It's reality, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, acceptance is usually the most powerful thing that we can do, because there's so many things in life that we can't change, or we can't. There's so many things that we can change, but most of those things are internal. They're within our sphere of influence. The whole Stephen Covey Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about that, your circle of influence. Like, there's very few things that are in our circle of influence, so we should focus on those things and then accept all the other things that are outside of it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to hear, hopefully with weight from a couple of dudes here who are in a situation financially where we don't have to work
Mhm.
and don't and have the option of traveling, knowing how to talk to girls. I used to be a dating coach as well, so I can go and talk to girls. I can sleep with girls if I want. I can also spend money on things that are materialistic if I want, and
Right.
I can get really, really ripped and big. But the funny thing is that I actually don't like putting on size because I don't feel as good. So I like to
Mhm.
stay at kind of like a lean, really healthy, energized kind of weight, even though I know how to get ripped and massive. I know how to talk to girls, but I choose not to sleep around because I'm looking for deep fulfillment with who I would consider to be my queen. And even though I can spend a lot of money on material things, I know it doesn't fill me up, so I choose not to do it. So it's interesting,
Mhm.
and I know that you've spoken about it that on this podcast so far as well. It's very interesting that, and hopefully the people that are listening go, there's something in that. But similar to what you said before, when it's like sell them what they want, give them what they need. I even spoke to like an, like a guru in like a ancient philosophic guru who's all about spirituality on the podcast, who said that he helps people get rich
Mhm.
because you
Mhm.
can't learn detachment unless you've got something to
Yes.
detach from.
It's so true. It's funny because I
So
get it all
funny.
the time when especially when I do dating coaching. People are like, that's such a scummy thing to do, and I'm like, it's actually like, when you look at the path of personal development and the men that have gone down path of personal development, most of it starts with learning game. Most of it
Yeah.
starts because then they start to realize, I have to develop myself as a person in order to actually achieve these goals, and
Yeah.
it puts them on that path. And it's like, and the thing is, you will never ever get someone to subscribe to a higher motive in life until you meet their lower motives, their needs. So if there's a
Yeah.
guy that's like, oh, if I could just get with a beautiful girl, then I'd be happy in life. I know you're not going to be happy in life. He's not going to be happy in life, but we have to give him the ability to do that so he can experience that and realize that, because he's not going to experience it any other way. Because until it's like choking someone and saying, oh, oxygen is not the most important thing in life. Well, when you're choking them, it is. And only when they have oxygen, then do they start to have, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they start to have, deeper needs. But with, for guys that, for guys that haven't had trouble with women, they don't see it. They don't understand why, this is so important, but it is important to a lot of guys, because
Mm.
they have to feel like they can do those things. I always talk about, I think there's three basic fears that all men that have to be fulfilled in order for you to unlock it and to become something greater than that. The first one is the fear of mortality, of death, of being a
Mm,
coward, we could say, right? Every man has to feel like he could get in a fight, he could put his life on the line, he wouldn't run from combat. Maybe you watch one of those war movies and you think to yourself, would I do that? Would I take my sword or would I run? Right? It's like you have to feel like that you're not afraid of death, that you would fight.
mm,
The second fear that men have is that of not being a self-made man, of not being able to procure money to make it on their own, right? And that's where I
mm,
think a lot of entrepreneurs they're seeking to cure that fear. They're
mm.
trying to prove that they could make it on their own, that they could make their own money, that they're self-sufficient, right? A man that doesn't feel like he can do those things is always going to have that fear that he's not good enough in that area. Then the third one is what I would say is most akin to cold approach, is to be able to see an attractive woman that you want to meet and to be able to talk to her and not be afraid and to know that you could have success in that area. And I think a guy that doesn't have those three bases met, he's not going to be able to focus on bigger things in life because those things will always haunt you. You won't feel like a real man until you feel like you've covered those bases in some way. And so that's where I think it's so
Interesting.
important to go through that path. So,
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So that's your model, right?
mhm,
Because
mhm,
that's like the bulldog mindset's about mastering those three basic things and then moving up in terms of your character and your mindset from
yeah,
that place. Yeah, that's really cool, dude. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say, what is your perspective? Because I think about this a bit
mhm,
on because I still battle with the idea of selling people what they want versus giving them what they need. And I feel like there's a spectrum here. There's just giving people what they want and then transitioning them to what they need once you've sold them what they want. But then there's also the concept of if you speak loudly and passionately enough about what people need, eh, and you're also embodying what they like, you also have what they want so they can witness you. Let's say Conor McGregor, he was hardcore preaching through his UFC, through his Instagram account all the time about the importance of doing it for fulfillment, doing it because you love it. And he starts talking about these more stoic philosophies and fulfillment based principles. Because he's mastered the external game, I feel like he'd have a lot more weight. And Elliot Hulse as well. I remember when Elliot Hulse first started transitioning from being more how to like get girls, how to get big and strong, how
mhm.
to make money, as like a lot of concepts that he would speak about in his daily videos. Then all of a sudden he had a spiritual awakening and became very irrelevant. And everyone's like, who the fuck's this guy now? Just talking about all
Exactly.
these wanky principles. And
Yeah.
backlash. But now that he's settled into his journey and settled and grounded and done his full loop of spiritual awakening, he actually preaches what people need from a place of strength. What are your thoughts on the spectrum between that? And have you thought about that as well yourself, or tried to preach really
Yeah.
loudly on the need?
There's a couple of things I would say about that. So it kind of circles back to what I said originally about how wisdom sounds like foolishness when you're ignorant.
Yeah.
And that's the one obstacle that you cannot get through. I was just having a conversation with, are you familiar with the Connor Murphy and his
No.
kind of thing that he's gone through? So Connor Murphy, friend of mine, he has this huge YouTube channel, and
Hmm.
he made his fame on YouTube by taking off his shirt in front of girls and filming it, and then their reaction, and like kind of think of it as a prank sort of aesthetics channel, right?
Yeah.
And he had this ayahuasca experience, and he did this 40-day fast, and he became super spiritual. And I actually relate to a lot of I think a lot of the truths that he discovered are the same truths that I discovered over maybe 15 years of personal development without drugs. uh, but he sort of got there in a different way, right? And so
Yeah.
he's really excited about preaching this truth to everyone. And I love the guy. He's a great guy. He's an awesome guy. I'm not intending to say anything negative about him. But I had this discussion with him when we were talking, and he was talking about like how his plan, and I hope that his plan works, but his plan is to just like give it to people. Like, and so he's created a bunch of videos recently telling people that he's God, that they're God, and trying to get them to understand these kind of universal truths about the nature of reality, and how girls and money and all these things won't bring you fulfillment, but you know your spiritual journey will, and these things.
I'm already
And
feeling a little bit touchy about it.
and people are not accepting that. They're,
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, there's some people obviously that are, but a majority, I mean, with these, you know, millions of YouTube subscribers, you would think that some people would say, okay, well, I follow this guy, I like this guy, he's had a lot more success in life than I've had, maybe he's not crazy, and maybe what he's saying has some truth to it. And there's some people that are saying that, but more majority of people are saying he's crazy, right? And it's unfortunate, because I know he's not crazy. I know he's a great guy, and I know that he stumbled upon some real truths in life, and he's trying to share them. But I had this discussion with him, and I was saying, like, you know, the path that I'm taking is to teach guys what they want, and then lead them down the path of what they need. And I feel like,
Yeah.
you know, I hope that your path works, because it would be better if we could just go straight to what they need.
Mm.
But I don't think that that's like when I think about my life, right? The journey I had to go through, there's probably would have been, there's all this information was out there when I was 18 or 20. There were people, there were, Tony Robbins was out there, there were other spiritual leaders and gurus that could have taught me all the things. The books were out there. I mean, but why did I not have that knowledge? Why did I not have that wisdom? Is because I wasn't ready for it. Because no matter what someone would have said, I wouldn't have accepted it, because I had to sort of go down the path. I had to get what I think I wanted, and then realize that that's not what I wanted. And but again, I don't mean to say that you have to like make all the wrong mistakes in life, and to fuck up your life in order to have a good life. Because I think that's where guys like us come in, is that we understand the journey, and we can guide guys through the journey, where we say, look, okay, yeah, okay, I know you got to go and do this, so go and do this, and I'll help you. It's almost like the parent that says, you know what, I know you're going to drink and you're going to smoke. So
Let's do it
here's a
together.
cigarette.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like that, where it's like, okay, so now let's get out your system, as opposed to saying, no, 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 you need to, like, this stuff is not going to get you. You're not going to like this in life. You need to, like, you know, if you're a parent and you try to tell your children that to avoid all the bad stuff, and here's the good stuff, you might be right, and it might be wisdom, but they're not going to accept it. But it's better to sit down and say, okay, well, let's have a drink together, and here's a cigarette. Let's smoke it up, or you know what I mean? And then to you know, and I think it serves two purposes, right? I think one is it allows the person to go ahead and experience what they need to experience because they have to go through the path of growth in life. They have to go through that
Yeah.
journey, but it gives them a guide along the path, which is so important, right? Because you know, not having the guide, you can, it's a very narrow path. Like, you can fall off and go into oblivion, into the abyss, and never come back, right? I mean, this is the danger of that path, but having a guide along that path is so important. And the second thing that it does is it shows that you are not uh, holier than thou, that you're not, that you are still a human being, still this person who has the same needs and wants and desires, who might enjoy having a cigarette, or drinking, or whatever it is, you know what I mean, or scoring with girls, right? But you're choosing a different path because it's more fulfilling, right? But
Yeah.
you're still that person, because if a person can't relate to you, they're not going to take any kind of teaching from you. And that's one thing that I've you know, sort of, you know, realized as I've been growing my audience, and kind of been in the public eye, is that when you see, even like you said with Elliot Hulse, a lot of guys now that were big Elliot Hulse fans are rejecting him, saying, "Oh, I don't like the new Elliot Hulse. Let's have the old Elliot Hulse." And part of the reason is because they no longer feel like they can relate to him,
Yeah.
and that's you know, kind of a dangerous point there. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think you have to go down that path. I wish there was a way that you could just, you know,
You
but
could
I don't know. You know,
you
do I really wish that there was? Like, I feel like
Yeah,
it's,
because
you kind of
you
have to have
could
that journey.
rebuild. You could rebuild your fault. Like this guy, I really resonate with what, and I think it's on point with what you say, that it
Mm,
has to stay relevant. You have to stay relevant to them. They need to feel like they can relate to you. And so what? Because Eckhart Tolle has got millions of followers and people that really love his work, but that's because on some level they feeling ready that they can relate to being a normal person wanting to find a bit of peace in life, and they can resonate with that. Whereas the followers of this guy's YouTube channel that are all about the hype, they can't yet
Right.
relate to just wanting to find a little bit of peace. They're looking for something big. They're looking for this being satiated with drama filled short-term gratification pulls in the main areas of life, getting big, getting ripped,
Right.
getting hot chicks, getting lots of money. And so he's going to have to build a new following, and he's probably not grounded enough himself yet to be able to attract that following, because he's not as wise as Eckhart Tolle.
And even if you looked at Eckhart Tolle's following, right? I would guess, I don't know, like I've never been in like his community. I don't know how big his community is, but I mean, there's obviously a lot of people that read the book. But I know from going to Tony Robbins seminars, there's a lot of people that sort of just came across it and they're kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, but they haven't actually gone through the actual real spiritual development, right?
Mm.
And so it might be the same case, as far as Eckhart Tolle or anyone who's teaching. I would venture to say that maybe 5 to 10% of the people following them, the kind of spiritual gurus, are actually there, and the other 90 to 95% are people that are just grabbing onto something, but they don't really understand it because they haven't
Mm.
gone down the journey. They haven't taken, like,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I was just having this discussion with someone about hallucinogenics and drugs and whatnot. And it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Yang, but
Nah,
Frank,
not dropping
Frank,
these
Frank
names.
yeah, Frank Yang, he's good friends with Elliot Hulse. Um, you might want to check out his channel, but
Mm.
he went through this journey, and he went through a psychedelic and all this stuff, and he's made some pretty powerful. His videos are trippy. They're trippy, but he's a very, very enlightened spiritual person, and he was talking about how psychedelics can never get you to they can give you a glimpse into sort of this kind of spiritual alignment, but they can't get you all the way.
Mm.
And how it's kind of a shortcut that a lot of people take, and I think that's probably the case. Is I don't think that most of the people that follow Eckhart Tolle or Tony Robbins, or any of their, or what's the
Sadhguru.
Sadhu, okay, yeah, Sadhguru. I don't think they really get it. I think a
Yeah.
majority of them are just kind of there because they're looking for something in life, but they haven't actually gone down. They don't really understand. They don't have understanding, and I don't
Yeah.
think they're going to gain understanding until they go through the journey themselves.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that for some reason they can still relate to these people. Like Tony Robbins
Right.
stays very relatable. He's got a
Right.
Ferrari. He talk whenever there's the big public holiday, he does a post on it. He's smart about his brand positioning because he knows he wants to stay relatable and relevant. He talks about success, even though I'm sure what him and Sage talk mostly about would probably be depth of connection and spirituality when they're by themselves. But what he's talking
Exactly.
about to the masses is success, is raising your standards, is go big goals, make money. And he really preaches that still. So he's smart enough to understand that. And so yeah,
Exactly.
it's a very
Yeah.
interesting topic. It's funny because I started teaching, became I was helping people. I built a multi-million-dollar business by helping people become successful life coaches, teaching them
Hmm.
to make money doing that. And then I transitioned into becoming a meditation teacher, and very little pickup, like in terms of
Yeah.
success in that area,
Trans.
because it was a
Yeah.
hard transition. It was a fast transition,
Right.
and in
Yeah.
the point that I was at the time, I thought I'd kind of like really gotten into it and really got it, but I actually I hadn't completed my own cycle of evolution for that season of understanding how to
Yeah.
integrate, and therefore I was unintegrated trying to help people who all they wanted was like they wanted an integrated figure. And I think Elliot Hulse was the same when he first switched to spirituality. Your friend sounds like he's
Yeah.
the same way. He's first hitting deep and hard into that area of let's get spiritual, but he hasn't landed in integration yet. I hadn't landed in integration, and arguably I'm still in a process of integrating, so but a lot more relevant. Cool
Yeah.
topic to
It's
talk
hard.
about.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially, creating YouTube content and stuff like that, because I'll create a video and I'll know, I'm like, this is like so good. Like, people need to, and I'll listen to it. And then it'll, like, no one, it'll get, like, there'll be some people that'll like, this is such a great video, but a majority of people it won't appeal to.
Yeah,
and it's like, you have to kind of mix it. You have to, like, so I try to mix the content. So I'm like, okay, let me make this video on how to get girls, and then let me make this video on how to really live your life like a stoic, and to let go of things in life and to not have attachment.
Yeah,
And it's like, and if I can combine the two, you know what I mean, because that's where, I don't know, it's an interesting problem, but
it
it's
is,
a good
man.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion on it. I feel like it's a beautiful, peaceful place to pause this discussion to resume for another interview in the future because I'd
Yeah.
love to have you back on it. Found it very enriching this conversation, and I really love what you've gone through in your journey. And I wanted to, before I ask my last question, I really want to take a moment to honor you, dude, for doing the work and being willing and open and vulnerable with all that you shares. Like I can tell that you're in a place of the only way that you can do it or get yourself to move with your business is from a place of service.
Mm.
And I can feel how real that is. And your whole tribe and crew, hopefully it builds from the back end of this conversation. Some people that are listening jump on your membership as well because they're really lucky to have you, man. You've done the
Thank you.
work, you're doing the work, you continue to do the work, and you've chosen it. And it's really inspiring. So thank you for an awesome conversation.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that.
Pleasure, man. So last question. Actually, before I ask that
Mm.
question, where can people find you, and what would you like to point them to?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is just to go to bulldogmindset.com. And then when you go there, there'll be a little pop up that asks if you'd like to take the Bulldog quiz and see what your score is. Of course, you would like to do that because you want to know what your score is. I basically give you a score from 0 to 10. It's 10 questions, but it's stuff that we talked about on this podcast. Things about like reading books and financial success and mindset and laziness
Mm,
and all those things. So that's how I kind of come up with the Bulldog score. Is really, and then I'll give you some tips on how to increase that score, right? How some videos, some content that will help you to increase that score in the various areas that you might be lacking in life, kind of a personal assessment. So yeah,
that's cool, man.
bulldogmindset.com and take the quiz. Yep.
Okay, cool. And what's your Insta handle? Because your Instagram's pretty awesome. It's filled with really potent, short, sharp, well branded content.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's at Bulldog Mindset, and yeah, I kind of write I guess, sort of an essay every day on there. That's kind of my creative outlet of writing nowadays. Even though Instagram's not really the platform for creative writing, that's what I use it for. So
Yeah, I do as well, actually. That's cool. Yeah, nice, man. And I highly recommend that if you resonated with some of what John spoke about today, I definitely did. Send him a message on Instagram. Just go send him
yeah,
a little in message, tell him what it meant to you and what you got, or any follow up questions he might do some content on in his Instagram or write an essay on it. Who knows? But that's awesome, man. Thank you for that. And that's cool. Get your bulldog. Like, how much of a bulldog are you? And that's not applicable to you women, but it's definitely worth following John, even if you're a chick. So, last question, man, to wrap up.
mm,
Someone comes to you and they're blindfolded. You can't see whether they're a man or a woman, and they've got a briefcase with $1 million in it. And they essentially say, "Hey, I want to give you this because I think you're valuable. I want the most valuable thing that you could possibly offer in exchange for this $1 million. So I can attribute $1 million worth of value to what you're about to tell me in
mm.
terms of like one tool or one piece of advice that what you would consider to be the most valuable thing that you know objectively. What would you tell them, prescribe to them in exchange for $1 million?"
All right, well, I've got the answer for you. It comes from the Bhagavad Gita, which is to say that you're entitled to your work, but not the fruits of your work. Which basically means that, look, you have to do everything in life just for doing it. You cannot do it for you cannot be results focused. The biggest distraction in life, the biggest thing that will stop you from feeling happiness and fulfillment in life is being results focused. Is thinking that you're entitled in some way to the fruits of your work. You do what you do because you do it, and stop trying to get something from it. It's okay to want results. It's okay to want money and to have success and all those things, but those things come as a byproduct of living your life, from a purpose. And so you do the work for the purpose of doing the work, and that alone, and that has to be enough for you. If that's not enough for you, then you'll always be seeking something more. The biggest fulfillment that you'll ever feel in life is a hard day of work. That's it. And anyone that's successful will tell you the same thing. And it's taking many of us many years and much heartache to discover this. And
Mm,
and I have to remind myself from time to time. I'm like, that's what's going to make you feel the most fulfilled and happy in life, John. It's putting in the work, and that's the
mm.
truth.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that. It's one of my favorite pieces from the Bhagavad Gita as well. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for coming on. It's been awesome. I feel like I've made a really awesome new friend today. So thanks for coming on, John. Lovely to get to know
Yeah,
you, man.
yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Ron.